Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Kushagra Goel and I hope all of you are doing well and taking all the necessary precautions that are required to save yourself and your family members from COVID-19. On that note, a lot of you had been pointing out that there is a lot of voice disturbance that was happening in yesterday's video. I have made certain changes to the setup today, so let me know if the problem is still there or not. And regarding chapterization, a lot of you had put in that request, so I am going to try doing that also once again. It's not that we don't want to do it, it's certain limitations because of the place from where we upload and all the cuts that need to be put in. But nevertheless, we're gonna try and do that for all of you. So don't worry. Whenever there is a administrative concern with a video or some problem that you face, feel free to put it in the comment section so that we also come to know, because once we are done recording the video, it's not like we see the entire stream. The more concern is to upload it for all of you at the earliest possible time. Therefore, moving on now, regarding doubts yesterday. So a lot of you had doubts about Indian currency being put on watch list. Now, in that regard, the first question a lot of you had was, what is Forex reserve? Forex reserve is reserve that a country has of foreign currency beyond Indian rupee. Now, so that answers the question, what is Forex reserve? Now, what does having Forex reserve imply? So someone pointed out that does it mean that we are poor? No. For example, China, European Union, different countries in Europe or otherwise have high Forex reserve doesn't mean they are poor. What it means is that investors or people who see or want to multiply their money see your economy as a place where they can do it, where they see the chance of increasing returns. So the growth prospect of money in your economy seems better than somewhere else. And that is what Forex reserves imply. When a country has high Forex reserves or a steady inflow of Forex reserve, it means that investors consistently see this country as a growth prospect. So for example, if you compare India's Forex reserve percentage growth during the time period when we had high growth rate, our GDP growth rate has been falling consistently since 2015 until now, where we are now in recession. So if you see the percentage increase of India's Forex reserve, let's say from 1999 to up till 2015, the years when India's economy is growing at a higher pace than a preceding year, it will show the percentage increase of Forex will be higher. So it means that higher or sustained Forex reserves is an implication that investors see your economy as a place where income can be increased, where the growth of their money will happen, that this economy is growing and therefore there will be better returns. So that is what it means. Moving on, now additional understanding of this is, what does it mean when a country is put on a watch list? What this means is that, for example, this country probably does not have that much demand for Forex, or investors are not putting in that much Forex in it, yet the Forex reserves are rising. So it is to see whether this is actually happening or not. What is the prospect? Is there some manipulation that is going on? So that is to verify whether this is taking place or not. All right. Then moving on now, I hope all of this addresses your doubts. If you have any other concerns related to this, feel free to ask. Moving on today's newspaper, a sad incident took place that 24 COVID-19 patients passed away in Nasik without as oxygen or due to leakage of oxygen at the hospital. Now, as panic has gripped the country with oxygen shortage, this is one of the hazards that has taken place on the same time. Moving on, what becomes more important for us is the news apart from this. So Covaxin, which is the second vaccine that has been approved, which is Bharat Biotech, has stated that its efficacy or vaccine efficacy is 78% as per phase 3 trials. This is on basis of analysis of 127 COVID-19 volunteers overall. So the vaccine prevents, the claim of the vaccine is that by 100% it prevents serious or hospitalization to COVID-19. And secondly, in terms of asymptomatic, the vaccine efficacy goes to 70%. So it is pegged at 78% in totality. This is a little lower than the other vaccines that have been approved across the world, such as the Pfizer vaccine, which is 95, Moderna 94, Sputnik 90. But it is better than the AstraZeneca or the Covishield vaccine that is there, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that has been approved in US. So it is in the middle. It definitely has better efficacy than the Chinese vaccines also. So that is good news for us. On the side, there is now data that has been uploaded by the country, by our government, which states how many people have got COVID-19 despite getting vaccination. So the data about this is that under Covaxin, 9.3 million doses have been administered and 4,208 people tested positive. And in 100 billion dosage of Covishield, 17,145 people tested positive. So the overall percentage of these vaccines based on their efficacy. So efficacy means that a vaccine, if it is administered to 100 people, 78 people will not get COVID, but there is a chance of 22 getting it. And in AstraZeneca, that there is a chance of 33 people getting the disease. So the percentage data can now be verified also once the vaccine has actually been administered, which shows that overall vaccination is the way for us to prevent the spread of disease from actually taking place. In that light, covering the vaccine news only, Serum Institute yesterday revealed the pricing at which it will charge different states. So now in the third phase of vaccine, central government, which had approved 35,000 crore rupees for COVID vaccines, had stated it will only give vaccine to frontline workers and people above the age of 45. For people below the age of 45, state governments need to procure the vaccines on their own. And for that, Serum Institute has placed the price of the Covishield vaccine as 400 rupees per dosage and 600 if you want to take it from a private hospital. So this is Serum Institute, the one which is making the Covishield AstraZeneca vaccine. It has claimed that outside and when it is exporting the vaccine to other countries, it is charging even more. But that is irrelevant for all of us. On the other news, India has been ranked once again 142nd on the Press Freedom Index. The Press Freedom Index, which is produced by Reporters Without Borders, is an annual index that determines press freedom in the country. It shows how free India is in general and how secure the journalists feel while giving it. So in that regard, India's ranking, which had been steadily falling, has now remained constant. In 2020 also it was 142nd and it has remained at 142nd this year also. So that is not so positive news about media freedom. Nevertheless, moving on to other national news, more about the number of shortage of vaccines and in general about the loss of people passing away because of COVID-19 and crematoriums running out of space. Then moving on to the editorial front. So on the left hand side, open and safe, Prime Minister Modi is right about lockdowns, but the vaccination policy needs reform. So this is first talking about how in his speech delivered to the nation day before yesterday, that lockdowns is something that should be on the last resort. Vaccination is the way ahead. So, but in that regard, the editorial criticizes the government in the sense that government has unregulated the system, but what this could do is give more power to the vaccine producing companies, wherein the central government has not reined in and determined a price, and overall the increase of price of the vaccine at which the central government was getting the vaccine and at what the state governments and the private sector will be getting is far higher. What this means is actually the consumer or the citizen of India, each citizen, based on where they are getting the vaccine, which state they belong, which part of the country they belong, they'll be paying different prices for the vaccine. This is unlike other countries where vaccine has been free for everyone, independent of whatever be the vaccine. For example, in almost every country, everyone has got the vaccine free of cost, and the government has borne it because of universal vaccine is the only mechanism to tide over the crisis which grips the country. The virus does not change based on different sites. So that is what the editorial talks about. And it also mentions in general that overall, the vaccine producing companies need the research that they have done on the COVID vaccine is actually through government grants and not their own investment. For example, for the Covishield AstraZeneca vaccine, the research funding for these companies has come from British government, other governments, India also, and universities and charities such as the Jenner Institute of Oxford, which has been the primary research institute. So they charging higher price for vaccines does not make sense because they did not put in the money at the first place. It was taxpayers' money of different countries that was used to provide or create these vaccines in the first place. So how can then they charge? One, to make the vaccine itself, they use the money that different governments provided them through taxpayers, and now they are charging the people only for administering or producing those vaccines. So it just doesn't make sense. So the editorial calls the central government to not abdicate its responsibility. The second editorial is on the international level. This is about the trial of Derek Chauvin, the policeman of Minneapolis who choked George Floyd to death and sprung up the entire Black Lives Matter movement once again in United States. It's also brought in to highlight systematic racism, police brutality, and the overall biasness that exists in the country of United States vis-a-vis Black Americans or African Americans, especially African American male. And despite his punishment that has taken place, more violent events regarding people of African American origin have been taking place even now. So this talks about that, see, convicting one is not going to help, something that the President of United States has talked about, that steps need to be taken to curb this, for which he has brought in a pan-America police reform bill, which will now be voted upon in the Senate, which needs support of Republicans and Democrats alike, which would ban chokeholds. This chokehold was the one reason through which George Floyd got murdered. Then secondly, qualified immunity for against law enforcement officers and policemen. And secondly, national standards for policing, so that state governments who have more systematic racism entrenched in them can also be brought under the law, and that is what the reform bill would do. So this is, at least justice has been served to George Floyd and his family members vis-a-vis the person who caused his death. However, the larger problem that still needs to be addressed. Then moving on, the main editorial once again is talking about two specific articles of the Constitution. What is the basis of this is in Tamil Nadu, a movement is garnering support, which is about freeing temples from state control. Now, the history of Tamil Nadu and Tamil Nadu politics is all about Brahmins dominating the social strata of the society. That they were the ones, the community had overall created this gap between others and Brahmins and non-Brahmins, where the power and control of religion resided with them, and everyone else was dependent on how they determined. So for that, the biggest reform movement was about making state involved in it, a state that is secular and does not favor any one community or strata of the society. The final conclusion of this was the 1951 Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Act of 1951, which was then replaced with Tamil Nadu Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Act. What this does is it provides the state with the power to govern these institutions and also be in charge of how they are functioning. Now, the security to the state comes through Article 25 and 26 of the Constitution. So, the first paragraph here talks about Article 25, which states, this is the one, the right freely to profess, practice and propagate religion subject to public order, morality and health. And it clarifies not stand in the way of the state making laws regulating any economic, financial or other secular activity associated with religion, or the way state making laws providing social welfare and reforms. So the purpose of state controlling temples in the first place was to provide social welfare and reform, wherein pujaris and administration of the temple was limited to one particular community. There was biases, untouchability was practiced, Dalits were not let in, permitted entry into the temples, women were not made in charge of affairs of the temple. So to provide the social reform, to provide equality, Article 25, and this was the purpose. And secondly, Article 26. It grants every religious denomination right to establish institutions to manage and administer. This right too is bound by considerations of public order, morality and health. What does religious denomination mean? So for example, within the Hindu religion, we have Shaivites, we have Vaishnavites. Under Vaishnavites, you have followers of Lord Rama. Certain people are followers, follow of Lord Hanuman. So each within a larger religion also, you have followers of different, within the religion you follow different sects. So those are religious denominations. That religious denominations, or for example, you may have a Hanuman temple, you may have a Shiv temple, you may have a Vishnu temple, you may have a Ram temple, or you may have a Sita temple. You could have, so these are religious denominations, and they also have the right to establish their institutions. But even then, a religious denomination is also bound by these orders of public order, morality and health, that they also cannot instigate division in the society. They have to be equal to everyone. So this is the constitutional protection that is granted. Now, this power of the state does not only is limited to Hindu religion. It extends beyond, wherein the Waqf Board and the Waqf Act of 1995 in Goa, the Christian, so it is not limited just to Hindu religion. It extends to any religion that exists in India, and the state has the power to interfere in their affairs or control such affairs in case they are violating public order, morality and health. So this is a pan-Indian state power, because India, when it got independence and even now, has a lot of division that is created within people or in society in the name of religion. To protect the people and protect the fundamental right of every individual to preach to God and practice their religion, state has been given the power to ensure that if there is a violation, this can happen. The problem now is that, let's say temples or the state gives up the power. How will you ensure that the inequality that preceded prior to state entering will not happen once again? How will we ensure equality? So the editorial talks about these constitutional roles and then raises the question that in case we go beyond it, how will we ensure that those principles that the Constitution guarantees are then also extended without state control? So that is the theme. for all of you, what becomes more important is knowing what Article 25 and 26 does. Remember the Sabrimala case, under which menstruating women are denied entry to Lord Ayyappa's temple. They had challenged this also on the ground of that this was a violation of their Article 25 and 26, where menstruating women are denied entry, which is not a permissible religious practice. This is not moral and is a violation and is a problematic law which is not based in religion but actually inequality, or to entrench inequality in the society. Therefore, these articles become important, what they do, what power they have provided to the state. If you have any doubts about this, feel free to put it in the comment section. Then the other editorial here, strengthening the process of choosing the police chief. This is about state governments and the police chief in state governments. The model law is that UPSC should determine list of candidates. Then the opposition along with the government plus members of civil society and people at the police force should come up with this mechanism. However, 26 states do not actually follow it at all, which talks about that this process needs to be reformed and a more public involved process that needs to be done. Then moving on, the op-ed on the left hand side, a recipe for vaccine inequity. This editorial, apart from criticizing this entire scheme, where it raises that, see, in India, the people within the age group of 18 to 44 who are not covered under the central government's vaccine program is 595 million, which means that they will require 1,190 million doses. Now, in that regard, if these vaccines are not free, what the taking the example of Serum Institute, which has now come up with its pricing mechanism. So it stated in an interview, the CEO of Serum Institute had pointed out that, see, we are selling the vaccine to the central government at 150 or 160 rupees per dosage. Even in that, they are making some amount of profit. So his statement was, I would not say we are not making any profit, but we have sacrificed what we call super profits. Super profits are needed to further build capacity, innovate and compete with Western companies, but we don't care. At this moment, we need the needs of the nation first, and we can make profits after a few months. Now, two things need to be understood. That first, even when they were selling the vaccine at 150 to 160 rupees, this company was still making profit. That they were not actually selling it for a loss. They were still, the overall production cost of the vaccine was still less than what they were selling to the central government. Now, secondly, regarding the need for super profits. So central government has already agreed to provide Serum Institute 3,000 crore rupees and Bharat Biotech 1,500 crore rupees to ramp up their manufacturing facility. This is not for the orders that the government has placed. This is primarily to ramp up their facility. So this need of super profit is also eliminated. Yet Serum Institute has now come up that they will sell the vaccine to state governments as 400 and to private institutions at 600. This is 2.5 times more than the profit they were making on earlier. So they are now making far more profit than what they had claimed earlier. So are they putting the need of the people first? First question. Now, secondly, this problem of AstraZeneca and the Serum Institute was pointed out to in Brazil also. In Brazil, they had stated that, see, we will not make profits during the coronavirus pandemic. That till the coronavirus is declared as a pandemic, we will not charge the price of the vaccine at a profitable cost, that we will not sell it for profit. That was the commitment they had made. Now in India, we know the coronavirus is not even in the stage of lesser pandemic. We are at the highest peak right now, and yet the company is doing so. So this is first problem which is being highlighted, that, see, this is one, they are making profits out of the need of the people. and trying to benefit them, while the government, so we talked about first thing that to develop the vaccine, they got money from governments across the world, with British government being the primary contributor to develop the vaccine. Then secondly, to ramp up their production facilities, central government is already given them money. And thirdly, even when the government was procuring the vaccines at a 150 rupee per dosage, they were still making profits, and now they have increased their level of profit. So what this creates is inequity in the society, because taxpayers are paying for their healthcare to the central government, but that responsibility is now being abdicated, and the government and this company is making far more profit based on the need. So this editorial and across this entire section of the newspaper talks about this abuse of powerful position that the pharmaceutical company has right now. Then on the right hand side, data and the new global order. This talks about how data and India, if it wants to become and grow its economy, overall needs digital data revolution, which is the algorithms. Now, the primary focus of this editorial is about mobile transactions or online transactions. When that happens, the overall growth and the payment mechanism. So the focus of this is online transactions and payment mechanism, which are based on data and algorithm. And that China is at the lead. India comes way less, but is still moving on because we have UPI system. So overall, this is challenging that our Western countries trying to restrict us from moving towards this area and trying to maintain the status quo. So this talks about another policy dynamic, all speculative. We don't know about any of this. Then the last op-ed talks about green hydrogen. Now, hydrogen is also something that is being tipped as a clean energy fuel for the future, which could replace crude oil and coal for running heavy machinery and vehicles. In that regard, the government is coming up with National Hydrogen Energy Mission, under which the global target is to produce 1.45 million tons of green hydrogen by 2023. And currently, India consumes around 5.5 million tons of hydrogen, which is primarily produced from imported fossil fuels. So this is talking about what the plan is and how India could achieve it. The policy mechanism for us, what needs to be noted down is the National Hydrogen Energy Mission, what is the target and what is India's plan under it. On that note, the data point then talks about how the overall vaccine shortage is huge in the country, and the pace of vaccine, as can be seen from this graph, is been falling every time. That it is fluctuating and is now going down and down since April 10. Then moving on the other national news. So first is about US Commission on International Religious Freedom, an independent bipartisan commission. Now this is for second year in a row, it has called for India to be placed on a country of particular concern, or CPC. Now their suggestion is non-binding on the government, but it calls for certain sanctions on people and asks US government to raise these concerns bilaterally, because the freedom of religious community in India has been going down. The overall majoritarianism and violence against religious minority in India is increasing. It calls that even though the president of the commission, which is Johnny More, he in his dissent still states that India is now at a crossroad and it has all to gain from its social harmony and everything to lose if it creates division in the society and treats its minority with a impunity and does not provide them justice. It also lists out the violence that has been taking place vis-a-vis different events that have taken place. Now this is all that we need to note about this news, is the commission that has suggested to it and what can be done. So the commission is US Commission on International Religious Freedom, and it has called for India to be placed on a country for particular concern. If the administration abides by it, sanctions can be imposed on India. Certain individuals from India who have been indulging in such violent activities, sanctions on those individuals can be imposed by the government of United States on such Indians. Now, then on the right hand side, we have already discussed from front page. This is Press Freedom Index, which is produced by French NGO Reporters Without Borders. Now, last year when India's ranking was so low, the Ministry, Information and Broadcasting Ministry actually criticized the NGO and called for government to also participate and clarify the stand. Despite all of that, India's ranking has not improved, something that the government wanted, because it knows that when these rankings are low, the overall foreign purview of India is seen negative. Then on the right hand side, Supreme Court yesterday created guidelines about appointing ad hoc judges, as the central government has not been approving the candidates for High Court appointment, and the vacancies in High Courts has been rising. The Supreme Court has used Article 224A of the Constitution, something it rarely does, to provide the Chief Justice of High Courts the power to appoint ad hoc judges. Under ad hoc judges, retired judges of High Court of the same state or another state can be appointed as ad hoc judges for a time period of 2 to 3 years to work on certain pendent cases before the High Court. So this is the power, and the Supreme Court has authorized the Chief Justice of respective state High Courts to appoint ad hoc judges in case there is a high pendency, which is obviously there, and high vacancy in the High Court, which is also happening because the central government is not approving the appointment of judges. Then moving on, apart from this, on national news, there is a report by an independent advertising agency, which is that these findings are by UNICEF and Gina Davis Institute of Gender in Media, which has come up with its report, Gender Bias and Inclusion in Advertising in India, which shows that women are stereotyped in Indian advertisements, where they are seen as homemakers, not so smart, and smarter positions or position of higher authority. The presumption is men are better than women. So these biases are there, yet at least in one regard, Indian advertisements are better, in the sense that they at least give Indian women 50 or above percentage of participation in advertising, which is far higher than United States, under which women are only given 30% share of participation in advertising. Then the Election Commission has denied the request of Trinamool Congress and the Congress party that in light of rising COVID cases in West Bengal, the remaining poll phases should now be clubbed. The Election Commission has stated this is not feasible to be done. The responsibility is on political parties to not create larger rallies and congregations. Then today, Prime Minister Modi will be participating in the climate summit. He will be speaking in the first session, which will be our collective sprint to 2030. And along with him, Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro will also be speaking in the same session. Then moving on, apart from this, on the national news, nothing of note for us. On the international news also, it's more about the Black Lives Matter movement from United States and how this is one big step for racism, that at least the person who has been in charge has now been justice has been served on George Floyd. At least now it is on the governments of US to curb systematic racism out of their system. Then moving on, apart from this, tensions between Russia and Western countries are on the boil. President Vladimir Putin stated that, see, you should not see it as Russia's weakness, and we can, if you cross a red line, we can act in that regard. Then there is one news about a submarine, which is KRI Nanggala 402, which is now missing. An Indonesian submarine with 53 sailors on board, it has gone missing, and search operations for the submarine are ongoing. Then from Chad, opposition parties have called this a coup by his son and the military to remove democracy in the country. Now that needs to be seen. Apart from that, nothing of note on the international front for us. And on the economic front, there is news about growth prospects being now dampening because of curb that are now in place because of COVID-19 pandemic. On the sporting side, yesterday I had pointed out that we will be discussing the Super League. However, details about Super League are not yet confirmed, in the sense that different clubs who had agreed to participate in the Super League have backed out. That is 6 English clubs, then Atletico Madrid, Inter Milan and AC Milan have also backed out from the project. However, the chairman of the Super League, that is Florentino Perez, who is the president of Real Madrid, has stated that, see, this process is not confirmed. They had signed legal binding contract and thus they cannot back out on Super League just like that. So therefore, because this is still a developing story, I want to wait for one more day, because this interview came out last night at late hours. Now we need to wait for these clubs who have given a commitment that they will withdraw to respond to it, or their lawyers to respond. So we'll wait for this to happen and then discuss this. On that note, I will conclude for the day. In today's newspaper, article 25-26 become the most important news, along with COVID vaccines and the pricing policy which is now under scanner, along with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. That is international level important news. And on India specific, 2 reports that you need to put in regarding the US body which calls for India to be a country of concern, and the press freedom index. So 5 news that you need to note down today. On that note, I will conclude for the day. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves. Tomorrow we will be discussing the climate summit and Prime Minister Modi's speech. So climate change will be something that we will be talking about tomorrow. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves.